and welcome to Live Parkinson's, Live an Exceptional Life. I'm your host, Chris Kustanbauter, and I've been living with Parkinson's for the past 13 years. The mission of this podcast is to help as many people living with Parkinson's as possible live a great quality of life. Today's episode is called Optimizing Movement, Expert Insights on Parkinson's Exercise Programs. I'm excited to have a guest in the studio today. We'll be speaking with her in just a moment. But first, I have a disclaimer that I wanted to go over with you, and that is this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat Parkinson's disease. Please follow the treatment plan prescribed by your physician. This podcast is based on my own personal experiences and is for informational purposes only. Are you having trouble getting started with an exercise program because you don't know what exercises are best for people with Parkinson's? Well, today, I'm fortunate to have a guest who I consider an expert in the field of exercise for people living with Parkinson's, Susannah Gillespie. Welcome, Susannah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Well, let me give you a little background on Susannah before we get started. Susannah has a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Maryland, a Master of Science from the University of Arkansas in Leadership. She's pursuing her Doctorate of Education in Public Health from the American College of Education, and it's also going to be in Public Health and Wellness. She's the Group Fitness Manager at York, PA Jewish Community Center. She co-developed the Momentum program, which I've talked about in previous podcasts. It's for people living with Parkinson's and other neurological disorders. It recently celebrated its 5th year anniversary. It has over 100 participants, and based on the recent quarterly measurements, participants have seen excellent results being part of the program. She conducts personal training, including targeted personal training sessions for people with both Parkinson's and special needs. She teaches soul fusion, bar, and is a certified yoga instructor. She's been married to her husband, Robert, for 21 years and has 2 children, Ethan, a student at Florida Atlantic University, and Charlotte, a high school sophomore. So let's dive into the program. Susannah, what are some of the challenges and excuses people with Parkinson's have that prevent them from wanting to exercise?
That's a great question. A lot of people come to us and they complain about fatigue as one of their number one most complained about symptoms of Parkinson's. Another problem is they've never done exercise before for a lot of cases, and they're just not sure what's right. The internet's full of information, and we're so happy that they've been looking online, but it really is overwhelming. One website will say one thing, and the other website says something else. So the real question is then, what do you do? And a lot of the doctors are just not telling them specifically what they should be doing. Another problem is they're afraid to fall, which is totally understandable because falling is scary. They're worried that they're going to get sore because a lot of times, you hear the embrace the burn or things like that from the internet or from TV and popular media, and nobody wants to be sore. Again, issues with imbalance. They're afraid to be unbalanced, afraid to fall because if they're going to fall down, they can't get up or they could get hurt. They're also afraid that when they arrive at a group exercise class full of people with Parkinson's, that they're going to see people that are more progressed in their symptoms. For us in Momentum, we have mixed level groups, and that can be really hard some days, but it's also wonderful too. Those who are struggling can be inspired and encouraged by those who are having good days. And then those who are having good days can cheerlead and support those who are having a rough time. And this is what really knits them together as a community.
So then as a trainer, how do you help people overcome this obstacle, some of these obstacles that you just talked about?
The best ways is really to find a friend. If you find a friend and get together with somebody initially and meet them before class, it's a really great way to kind of reduce the scariness of going into a class. They can kind of stop or answer some of the questions about what class is like beforehand, maybe dispel some of the myths that you might have. Talk to one of the instructors before you arrive at class and ask, what do you do in a class? Find out that maybe the goal is not to make you super sore. The goal is not to push you to your ultimate limits. Find out what some of the class exercises are going to be. A lot of the instructors would be more than happy to show and demonstrate some of the exercises before class even starts. That way you know what to expect before you even get in there.
Great. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
From a certified trainer's perspective, in your experience working with people living with Parkinson's, Why is exercise so important in people living with Parkinson's disease?
Parkinson's are not everyone needs to exercise, and that's something that we see challenging adults across the board. So many people just don't exercise. So exercise is going to boost your endorphins and your serotonin levels, and that's going to make you feel good and increase your energy when your condition is really working against you and make you feel tired and depressed. Parkinson's is really working to rob you of your flexibility, and you really need to now work twice as hard to combat that. If we needed living proof of what exercise can do, I always tell people in class, just look at you. As much as I know you hate the phrase, you don't look like you have Parkinson's, that's because you've treated exercise like it's your job and you've really worked so hard against it, and it really does work.
Do you find that people living with Parkinson's buy into why exercise is important then?
I think it really takes time living in working with an exercise program to find that it works. The proof is in the pudding, per se. The first couple times they do it, I think they're really skeptical. We've had a couple people try class once or twice and never come back, which is so sad because we know if they just give it a little bit more time, so many people want that magic bullet, that one pill that's going to fix everything. We know it takes time. So I think it really takes about a month or a month and a half of really giving it your all every day to start to see those little changes. And for somebody to outside of your circle or maybe a spouse or a friend to say, hey, you seem to be working a little bit better. You seem to be standing up a little bit taller. You don't seem as wobbly. And then you realize, oh, hey, something's different. Something's working. We've had a number of participants that come up to us and say, my friend from church noticed that I'm standing up a little bit taller, or my clothes are fitting better, or I just seem to be glowing. And it's one of those kind of silly things like it's a moisturizer, but no, it's class because they just have a greater confidence about their movements. And that's when all of a sudden you realize this has been the change rather than maybe a medicine. Not to say that medicine is not needed, but this is the one thing that you can do. And the more, the better. There's no limitations. There's no contraindications for exercise. And that's one of the great things about it.
And I can say as a participant in the momentum classes that the excitement people have on their face when they accomplish a challenge they didn't think they could do.
Oh my gosh,
and
yeah.
everybody in the class rallies around them and really helps uplift them. Or if they see that they're struggling, they help them, overcome some of the challenges that they might be having. So I think it's a great program, and I think it's a great way to get people involved and stay active in the program versus dropping out and going home and isolating, which is one of the things that can cause the disease to progress a lot more rapidly is social isolation.
Yeah.
So,
and I think too, being involved in a program, you have that extra layer of people watching out for you too. So when we have people that have been participating frequently, and then all of a sudden we notice that they're not there. And if they haven't told us they're going to be on vacation, or if they haven't told us that they're having a surgery and we notice that they're not there, you have people that are going to pick up the phone and say, hey, where have you been? And sometimes it just takes that one phone call to bring you back. And to have people looking out for you is such a wonderful feeling. You really do feel more of that family feel to that. And then you're having people that are embedded and really committed to your results. And that feels great too.
and then in terms of in working with people with Parkinson's, how does the caregiver fit in with, you see people coming into the momentum program and sometimes a caregiver comes into class, sometimes they just drop the person off. So what do you see the caregiver's role in this?
So we love both ways. We love for the caregiver to be coming into class and participating because then they're learning about what their loved one needs to be doing, and they can help reinforce that at home. It can be exercise for the care partner who definitely needs exercise just as much as the person with Parkinson's does. Sometimes they need that break. And if they're sitting out on a chair and getting to read their book or working on cross stitch or just getting a chance to go off and do something else, sometimes they need that break. And we understand and respect that. And so either way they work it, that's wonderful. And that's the time that they need to just have their downtime. That's great too.
Great. Thanks for that. All right, moving on. How do you approach designing an exercise program for people with Parkinson's?
Great question. So I always come into class with a plan, but I'm never married to that plan. The first few minutes of class, I have everybody walking in circles, and people might think that's me just having some busy time, and that's really me just getting my microphone set up, and I'm chatting with people, and I'm really watching. I'm observing. I'm looking at everybody for their gait patterns. I'm looking at everybody for their energy levels. Are they sluggish? Who's wobbly? Just kind of a little bit of an overall observation. Once I start to see what I'm seeing for the day, I'm going to start throwing some challenges in. I'm going to have them walk backwards, walk sideways, start to throw those challenges and see how they handle them. From there, are they getting confused? Are people handling the challenge as well? I'll bring them into a circle and I ask everybody the same question, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing today? I also ask a fun question, which is also a cognitive question to see, are they remembering the question? And how do they respond to it? Can they respond to it? We have a couple individuals where we know dementia is progressing a little bit more. So I want to see how they're feeling today too. So that 1 to 10 really gives me a gauge on how the class is doing overall. If everybody is feeling a little worse today, I'm going to change the plan. If everyone's feeling really well, I'm going to make that plan a little bit harder today. From there, I always go right into our power moves. The power moves, I'm going to add in a layer of cognitive challenge, whether that's numbers, whether that's counting backwards, which everybody hates, whether it's spelling backwards. We're adding in some new ones with fractions right now and decimals, which has really thrown everybody for a loop, which is great. My favorite work to do is balance work and working on minor muscle groups. Major muscle groups are great, but a lot of people can do those on their own or they're getting those in our other classes. We have classes 5 days a week, and all the other instructors are working on those muscle groups. So my favorite is to work on the smaller muscle groups. So I'm going to dig into a lot of that balance work.
Can I interrupt you
Sure.
there? When you're talking smaller muscle groups, can you go into a little more detail on
Absolutely.
this?
So those I'm referring to as like stabilizers. So if you think of a major muscle group, you're thinking about your quads and hamstrings, big muscles, big functional muscles for like sitting down, standing up, biceps, triceps. When I'm talking about stabilizers and minor muscle groups, I'm talking about things that are going to help you a little bit more posturally and a little bit more for your balance. So things that are supporting muscle groups. So things that you're going to be working a little bit more laterally, side to side. So I'm going to be having people do things like curtsy squats and bowler lunges, anything with turnout. So toes turned outward, heels turned in. So I will bring out ballet bars and have people work those. I'm going to have people twisting a lot. Things that are going to challenge your sense of gravity in a little ways with dipping down, head down towards the floor. I love getting people on the floor because everybody hates it because they won't do it on their own. But we're a class that has about 4 volunteers, so we're really lucky. So I have those extra spotters. Floor work is really hard because we know that we need it, but we're not always willing to do it on our own at home because we don't always have the capacity for somebody to help us off the ground without it. So our goal is to really teach people how to use the floor to their advantage. So when we know that people eventually are going to fall, I mean, I fall myself. I'm 44, going to be 44. You need to do it. And it's a phrase that we love. It's called eat the frog. If you were given a buffet of wonderful things and you also have to eat a frog, get the frog over with first and then eat all the wonderful things afterwards. So if we work on that floor work, we're getting over the yucky stuff so we can work on everything else. The final thing I like to work on is our connective tissue work and our joint work. Like to do that with yin yoga. So we're using bolster pillows to work in there. We're staying in our poses for a lot longer, for 3 to 5 minutes. I'll turn the lights down, calming music, and people are laying in their poses and just letting gravity do a lot of the passive work. And then sometimes I'll add in some guided meditation. At the end, we slowly transfer up. We don't want to do that too quickly. Then we'll circle back in, do a little bit of gentle stretching. And then again, I like to go back to that on a scale of 1 to 10. How are you doing? Because then I want to see, how do people feel after? 2 things. One, sometimes people are going to feel worse at the end of class because they're tired, and that's okay. 9 times out of 10, most people feel better, and I want them that as positive reinforcement. This is why you came. You're feeling better because you moved. You're feeling better because you were challenged. You got that heart rate up, and or with that stress relief from the guided meditation, you're feeling more centered, more relaxed. We're targeting all the things that your body needed today and every single day.
Great. Can you talk about how stretching fits into your exercise program? Is it something that people should do beforehand, at the end of exercise, or both?
That's a great question. A lot of people were taught when they were younger to stretch beforehand. And we really have a lot of good research that shows we don't want to do that. And if you think about a rubber band, if you pull a rubber band too quickly right away, you're going to snap it. But if you kind of play with that rubber band, warm it up in your hands, and then you start to stretch it, you're going to get a lot more stretch out of it. And our muscles are very similar in that way. So if you're coming in cold from outside, and any day, you want to start to move your muscles slowly. And that's what the warm up and most of your workout is meant to do, is to get your muscles moving, to get some big movements out of yourself. I like to do your big stretching at the end. You can do some gentle stretching after about 5 or 10 minutes of warm up, but I would never say to do really deep stretching until the end of your work.
Okay. People read a lot about target heart rate and keeping their heart rate in a zone. when you're designing an exercise program or when you come in to do a momentum class, how do you get people's heart rate to build slowly and then maybe keep it in a zone and then bring it down?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people like to use their trackers from like a wristwatch or a heart rate monitor around their chest. Sometimes that technology is great if you have it. If you don't have it, we really go back to a talk test. So if you're able to have a conversation with a friend while you're working out, that's my best gauge for knowing if you're in a safe heart rate. So for me, that's why we start with our walking, transitioning in. As their walking progresses, that's when we go to the power moves. We're doing that, we're building. Once we've done our warm up, then I would incorporate any weights that's really going to amp your heart rate up. After probably about 20 or 30 minutes, we can be at our peak heart rate. Then we're going to start to ramp down. And then that's when we're going to move into our slower movements, our stretching. And that way, when I'm sending you on your way, your heart rate is back to just a resting heart rate.
Yeah. So I guess it's important not to have come in and then just shoot your heart rate straight up.
Exactly. People will try to grab weights in the start of class and I tell them to put them right back.
Yeah, so that's why, because I've seen you do that.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. And what type of exercises and how often should they be done in a well-designed exercise plan for Parkinson's?
Well, I would say if I had a best case scenario, I would say exercising twice a day, every day. I know that's probably not realistic for everybody, but at least exercising a half hour of vigorous exercise every single day for everybody as a bare minimum. And a half hour of vigorous does not mean going for a walk outside. I know people love to walk and walking is great, but for us, that's not vigorous exercising. I want your heart rate up. I want you huffing and puffing for at least a half an hour each day. I think your exercise plan should consist of a little bit of everything. So that's going to be anything cardio that gets the heart rate up. You should have some strength training involved where you're using resistance, and that could be weights, that could be cable machines, that could be dumbbells, that could be resistance tubing, that could be using your body weight as your own resistance, like push-ups or yoga where you're holding poses for a while. Things like Tai Chi, and yoga, things that are going to be stress relieving and balance inducing and weight shifting. Weight shifting exercises are very important in your balance work because, again, that's your proprioception. So how you understand your body in space, how you extend limbs away from your body is extremely important. Anything that's going to have you working on amplitude. So we want you to make your movements as big as possible because one of the things that Parkinson's will do is force you to make your movement smaller without your knowledge. So even your voice is going to get smaller. If you notice your handwriting is getting smaller, you're not going to realize it all the time. So everything that we're going to do for the most part in the classes is to try to make you extend your limbs as far away from yourself as possible. We'll use scarves as a way of very good visual indicator to know if you're using all of your muscle and all of your power to extend. So if you put a handkerchief in your hand and you extend it out for a power move, if you're not using your amplitude, that scarf is going to kind of look like a wet noodle and it's not going to go anywhere. If you're using all your amplitude, that handkerchief is going to whip out almost like you're trying to towel whip somebody. And that's our good indicator for that. Anything that's also going to be a good stress reducer. So again, something that's restorative, like a yoga, like a mind-body exercise. So you really need to do a little bit of everything. You need to do it every day. And if it was my money on the dollar, it's doing it multiple times a day, which I know is a lot. But if you break it up, it doesn't have to be hours on hours every day. But if you do a half hour in the morning, a half hour midday, and a half hour in the evening, I think you could do a really good job. And that could fit into everybody's life because I think we have more time in our day than we really think we do.
So, and the way you're thinking about it, it's a total of an hour and a half a day. But how about those people that are very apprehensive about exercise? If they only have a half an hour, would you recommend that they do a certain type of exercise one day? So maybe that day they focus on balance, the next day they focus on strength, the next day they focus on aerobics, or should they try to mix the exercises in that 30 to 45 minutes?
I think in a perfect world, they should mix them all in because I think one of the keys is really getting your heart rate up every single day. So if you only had a half an hour every single day, I would say maybe 20 minutes of it should really be to get your heart rate up into a really good huffing and puffing zone. Maybe 5 minutes could be for strength building and then another 5 minutes for stress reduction.
Some of the exercises they can do sitting down as well, right? If
Oh,
if
absolutely.
they're having trouble with their balance or walking.
You can do a lot with a chair. You can really get your heart rate up with a chair. You can do strength exercises in a chair. You can do yoga in a chair. So chairs are great, especially if you're concerned about falling right now. And then you'll get stronger, and then you can start to transition up, and you can start, and then you can hold on to a chair and stand behind it.
We do chair squats.
Hmm.
There's a class strictly on stretching where we sit in the chair for a majority of the class and do it stretches, but it's very, it gets your heart rate up and you do break a sweat. So and then you feel good afterwards too, because you've really stretched out all your muscles. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's a great opportunity. What do you feel are the most critical types of exercise for a person with Parkinson's, and why?
I really feel like the issues with getting the amplitude exercises in is one of the biggest issues to really combat that shortening and the smallness that sets in. We also really need to focus on anything that's going to help with gait. So, working in the hips, anything that's going to keep your hip flexibility. Again, we'll see a lot of shuffling, and that causes the falling to happen. So, anything that's working to keep hip mobility in, and focusing on anything in posterior chain. So posterior chain is anything that's working from the back of your head all the way down the back of your legs. So working on back strength, back flexibility, hips, glutes, hamstrings, everything down in the back. Probably about that.
I know when I work out with you once a week, we do a lot of ab work, and I haven't heard you mention ab work. Can you talk about how your core, or how abs fit into the exercise program?
Yes. So if you think about your core muscles, a lot of people just think about the front abs, your six pack, and your core really circles around your entire abdomen and your back. So if you think about a corset around a lady, squeezing and pulling you and lifting you up, that's a lot of the focus for real true core work. And so for Parkinson's, again, if you see people kind of hunched over and rolling over shoulders, rounding down, the more you're working on your core work, the more upright and strong you're going to be. So the more ab work we can do, the taller you can stand, the more upright. And so the center of gravity, if you're thinking about it, your head needs to be above your shoulders need to be above your hips need to be above your feet. And if all of those come into alignment, you're going to be a much more solid tree, if you want to think about it that way. If you're leaning over because your core work has declined and you don't have that strength to be standing up straight, you're going to be falling forward. And that's just me one more challenge that you have to overcome for every single movement. If your core is strong and you're standing upright, every other movement is so much easier because all of that has been maintained.
So does core play a big role in balance then?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the foundation of all of your balance.
And then the back work that you talked about, that's to keep their posture upright, versus because with Parkinson's, as the disease progresses, you start to hunch over.
Yes.
So that's what those back exercises are for.
Absolutely.
And then how about the chest exercises? They're to keep you opened up to help.
So a lot of the chest work that we do is really to stretch through the front of the chest and then to build the back muscles behind the chest. So we're counteracting a lot of what the Parkinson's symptoms are doing against you.
I've read a lot about cognitive stimulation being a key component of helping prevent cognitive decline.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I just wrote an article on theparkinsons.com on cognitive exercises as part of your physical exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But so how do you incorporate cognitive challenges and exercises into your exercise program?
Yeah, we do this every single class, every single day. We really try to incorporate it into movement exercises because this accomplishes two things. Moving gets the blood flowing for sure, and that's going to stimulate your brain so much better. We've attempted cognitive games while standing still, and you really see the difference between standing still while attempting the cognitive games and then adding that movement component. When they start moving, everything starts to work just a little bit better. So we really try to randomize the different games that we challenge the brain with in class. Sometimes we're adding by counting in odd patterns. Sometimes we're spelling backwards. Like I said, sometimes we add that kinetic element. One of the games that we've been playing recently is we'll stand in a circle and then we'll count off in threes or fours. And then each number that we count, 1, 2, 3, we'll add either a clap or a stomp or a different movement along with that number. As we go along, we count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Then all of a sudden we'll take away a number or we'll take away a movement. And it's surprising how challenging that is for people to remember what we've taken away. And then it's interesting as we go along working in those groups. Sometimes it's challenging when somebody makes a mistake, because then there is that moment of embarrassment, like, somebody saw that I made a mistake. But then you see that group camaraderie come together because either people help you out or you're like, oh, I screwed that up last time. You can kind of laugh it off. But then it's good too, because then all of a sudden you realize, like, if you thought you didn't need that cognitive game, if at first it seems kind of silly because, we're sitting there counting off in threes, like this seems like child's play. You're like, oh man, maybe I really need to be working on this a little bit more. So it's a good kind of gut check to realize I really need to be working on this. And it really helps to reinforce why we're doing some of the things we're doing. Some of the games that we're playing are singular. So while we're doing our power moves and just doing the counting or the smelling, and then some of the games are paired off. So we're doing mirroring exercises where one person is the leader, the other person is the follower. And without saying anything, you have to just follow the other person's movements. So we really try to incorporate all different hemispheres of the brain in what we're doing. So while you don't necessarily realize it's a game or you don't really realize what we're doing, it's kind of snuck in there to make it a challenge.
So when you combine cognitive exercises with the physical exercise piece, I guess that's considered a dual task exercise.
Absolutely.
And how often should someone do should they spend more time doing that versus just, I'm going to work on a cognitive exercise and then I'm going to go do some physical exercise? Is it more important to combine the two?
I think it's more time efficient for sure. There's only so many hours in a day. And if I'm already asking you to do exercise for an hour and a half, you might as well add the cognitive component to it. And if we know that adding in the physical activity with the cognitive makes it work better, it seems like it would make sense to put them both together. So I think anytime you can add any of it in, that's great. So if you only have a chance, while you're sitting in a car as a passenger to do a cognitive exercise, absolutely do it. But if you're on a treadmill and you want to be doing a cognitive game, absolutely do it. So anytime you can sneak it in, sneak it in. So if it's moving, it's great. And if it's not moving, it's good too.
One of the other things that I know we do in class is to help with interaction and sense of community is you get us two different circles and then we have to come up with a word. It might be a fall vegetable. And then the person next to you has to start their word with whatever the letter is at the end of the word. So it's a great exercise to make people think. And then plus you can help each other out as well. And
it's hard. You really have to pay attention. You have to think. You're spelling in your head without realizing you're spelling in your head. And then you have to be creative with coming up with something. You're coming up with categories. It's a lot harder than I think, again, that we think of right off the bat. And then, you're helping build team spirit and then helping each other out. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then we've also done where someone tells a short story and then the other person has to build on that as well. So I think one of the things that's really great about those exercises is they really make you think rather than just giving a one-word response.
Right.
And that helps build your cognitive skills as well.
And you're working on vocalization and vocal strength too, because you're having to be loud enough so the person across the way hears you and over the loudness of the opposing group on the other side of the room too. So yeah, it works on a lot of levels.
Well, that's a good point because I know within the class, there's people with different vocal ranges. Some people are very hard to hear, which is part of the progression.
Right.
And then you have other people that you can hear very well. So it really tests your skills.
Absolutely.
One of the things I talk about too is attitude, having a positive attitude. And that was one of the 4 strategies I talked about in the book was a spectacular life, the 4 strategies of living with Parkinson's. And do you think attitude is a major factor in exercise? And if so, what role does attitude play?
Absolutely. Attitude determines everything. If people decide that their diagnosis is a death sentence, it really is going to be, and they're going to decline quickly. If they decide that they're going to use it for good, it's quite amazing what will happen. It is, of course, normal to have days that you're going to feel tired and more run down, more stiff. And when those days happen, it's really important to find out what makes you feel best, to take notes about what's happening and how you're going to feel better, and then how to tackle it. When you figure out what those things are, write them down because you're going to need those strategies again. While we're on the subject of taking notes, I'm a big fan of journaling, especially when it comes down to figuring out what makes you tick, what works well, what doesn't work well. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be every single day, but now you're learning all about you. And the more notes and the more information you have, especially when you have to go back to your doctor or maybe even your trainer, the better we're going to be about helping you kind of figure out and solve some of the mysteries. So one of the first things that you could do in the morning is start your day off with a great attitude. If you wake up and the journal is the thing that you want to incorporate, maybe write down what you're grateful for. Maybe also write some plans for the day. I think sometimes we forget to have goals as we get a little bit older, but goal setting is huge. Find something that you're going to work for. This is also going to help keep you moving, especially when maybe your attitude is waning and you need something to keep you going for. If you have a goal that you're working for and you're like, today I'm not feeling great, but hey, I know that by December 31st, I really wanted to be able to do 15 squats in X amount of time. I'm going to work a little bit harder. And if I'm going to work a little bit harder and then you work on that goal and you exercise a little bit more and you get the serotonin, the dopamine up, you build up that attitude again. You build up that good feeling. So that's going to get you moving back in that positive direction. So it's important to accept those small setbacks and then keep the big, wonderful picture in mind. And that's going to keep you on track for success.
As a group fitness manager, you teach a lot of group fitness classes, but in terms of the momentum class, a lot of times people will come into the class and you can see that they're not
feeling it.
They're not exuding that positive attitude.
Yeah.
But at the end of class, a lot of times you see that change. And from your perspective, teaching the class, what do you think causes that change?
I think one of the biggest things is we have to know our participants. One of the things I've loved about this class is the longevity we've had with them. For some of them, we've been together for 5 years. Some of them, it's been shorter, but with having the relationship with some of them for 5 years, and we've done their intakes and we've heard the life stories and we've laughed with them and we've cried with them. And so we know a lot of what makes them tick. We know about the struggles. People have told us some very personal things. So we have a really deep relationship with them. So also as a trainer, we really learn about motivation, and I like to push buttons sometimes as a trainer and as an instructor. So I think I've learned pretty well if people need the cheerleading moment or if they need the come to Jesus moment. And I've definitely had those come to Jesus classes where I've pushed buttons. I'm like, snap out of it. You guys need to pull yourselves together. And those are the ones where I get out the battle ropes. And I give them the battle ropes and I line them up and I have them all hold the ropes and I give them a really, really hard, crappy task to do. And I make them do it together. And that's when they just squat for like minutes at a time. And I give them a phrase. And one of my favorite ones is like, can, I will, I must. And that's when I start preaching to them. And I evangelize what they need to do and why they're here and why, yes, they showed up. So number one, we're on a winning streak if they showed up, right? Because if it was a really, really bad day, they wouldn't have come. They're already there. So I'm preaching to the choir at some points, but they knew they needed something to build them up that day. And so I really pushed them and really tried to remind them that they needed to be here. So those are the ones where it's been great, where I have really dug in and forced them to remember why they showed up and why they're part of the program. And those are the ones where I've gone home or just gone back to my office, and a few minutes later I get a little knock at the door and they're like, thank you, I really needed that. Or I get the emails later or the text messages and they're like, you don't know how much I needed to hear those words today. So it's nice that we know, I think, how much we can push them to make them feel those things, and how good that we can have that relationship where we can have that transaction where they had to feel that way and they knew that they could still come and get that, and they knew that they could lean into it and show it to us.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. One of the things, just from a personal standpoint, playing high school and college sports, is I always looked at great coaches as ones that not were easy on you, but that pushed you to do things that you didn't think you could do.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were talking there, I remember you giving us some of those lectures, I guess we'll call it, but they really did push it, and they taught you that, I can do more than I think I can, and I can push beyond where I think I don't want to limit myself now.
Right.
And I think sometimes we all put limits on ourselves where you go into something and you think, oh, I can't do this. And you can do it if you really put your mind to it. You just have to break it down into small pieces, and then you build on the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Working with a friend in the momentum class and working on balance.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I'll never be able to do that. And I said, never use the word never.
Right.
And within 10 minutes, just showing him a couple different strategies, he was amazed at what he could do. But if you tell yourself, I can never do that, or I can't, you won't. Try. And if you start, like I said, if you start small and build, nobody's going to be an expert the first time, but start small. And it's just like with guitar, when I play guitar, I always break it down into a measure. Once I learn the measure, I go to the next measure versus trying to play the whole song. And then I just get frustrated. And so the benefit of the momentum class and you as a group fitness manager is that you get to push us. And then we also get the motivation and camaraderie and positivity from each other. So you can go into a class feeling maybe down, but the class is really going to help lift you up. But really, the way I like to think of things is attitude is really a mindset. And you can tell yourself you're miserable. And you can make yourself miserable in 30 seconds. You can do the same thing positively.
Right.
So I think great if people can say, instead of, oh, I feel terrible today. Well, you could say, I don't feel my best today, but I'm going to do the best I can. And just doing that really switches the mindset because it's real easy. We see it all the time when you watch the news or the media, everything, you're bombarded with negativity. And it's easy to take the negative pathway. It flows that way. But positivity is harder because people aren't used to it. But it's real easy just to change your thought pattern. From negative to positive. So I think I'm glad you talked about that because I think attitude and having a positive attitude, showing up and wanting to challenge yourself are going to pay big dividends as part of your exercise program.
Yeah. Whenever people tell me the thing that they can't do, I'm like, all right, now tell me 3 things that you can do. Like, let's flip that. And then they always, like, I can't think of anything. I'm like, yes, you can think of 3 things that you can do. And then they find it. Right. And then once they start to look for it, then they realize that there's more than 3 things that they can do. Yeah.
Exactly. Can you share some success stories from your workout with Parkinson's patients?
Well, I was thinking about that this morning, and I have a feeling that you've got some of those success stories lined up to be coming on your show, and I didn't necessarily want to take their stories away from them, so I'm going to let them handle their stories themselves. And I know you don't handle praise well, but we are so incredibly proud of all that you've accomplished, and I'm not sure that we can claim any of your success as ours. But we are so blessed to have you in the program. You're definitely the Superman that many of our participants look for and what you can physically and cognitively accomplish. What I don't think that they truly grasp is how hard you work at it, and watching how selflessly you help everybody else in the program do their best is one of the best things that I think we can ever see in our program and come through it. Also, seeing the relationships in general that the program has formed has been amazing. And what started as just as a class and then became a class and a coffee hour during COVID, and then a class and a breakfast and a lunch and a social group and a support group, and then outings and now specialty groups and friendship and so much more. It's been so much more than I think we could ever thought possible. So I think the success story is really a success program and you. And so I'm going to let you tell the stories of all the successful people that have come as they come onto your show.
Oh, great. Yes, I do have people in the class that can come and share their success story. So that's perfect. But I'd like to turn the tables for a minute because one of the things that we talk about in class and we're all impressed with is the instructors. I mean, every one of the instructors they care, they want to see people succeed, and they're not afraid to sit down and listen and figure out what you need, but also to challenge, like you mentioned earlier, to challenge you. And I think what's important is for the instructors and even in people that are leading the exercises is that it's hard for them to walk away and realize the impact you've made on these people's lives. And everybody in the class goes home and they have a better quality of life because of what they did in class. So I think success stories are not only with the participants, but they're also with the instructors as well. And I think that's important to point out. So all you instructors and you and Jen that co-developed the program, if you could really understand how much you've impacted people's lives and help them with being able to do things that they didn't think they'd be able to do anymore, it's really wonderful to see. So that's one of the success stories I see with the program as well. So it's a two-way street.
Thank you.
So
It's so fun because like we go back into the office and with more and more instructors coming into it. Like we're sitting there always trying to think like, what can we do better? How can we improve? How can we get better results for you guys? And to hear you guys doing the same on your end, like how can you guys do it better? How can you find greater results and how can you help each other more? It's kind of like the best microcosm for society and in its little home right now that we have. So it's great.
I guess when you're developing a program, you're looking, especially this type of program, you think of it more as an exercise program, but it's really become this holistic program. I mean, we do cognition, we do exercise, but we also, the social aspect is so important. And then now one of the things that we're starting is like hobby groups. So someone that's interested in music, we're going to have a little group that you can go to. If you're interested in music, you go and you join and you either play an instrument or you sing. There's maybe a group for dancing. Some people are good with art. They're going to start an art group, or maybe they get together and paint. So it's incorporating all the aspects of people's quality of life. It's not just exercise. It's the social aspect, which is so important. And then it's also having a good quality of life by being engaged with others, because you get this sense of accomplishment at the end of the day. So whether it's coming into class and being able to complete the class, that's a great sense of accomplishment. But it's a great sense of accomplishment too when you get together as a group and maybe you're interested in music and you all get together and you play a song and you say, wow, we did great at that.
Yeah.
And so it gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you a sense of achievement. And it gives you a sense of belonging. So I think that's what the program's really done in terms of how I think about it. What recommendations do you have for a person who is newly diagnosed with Parkinson's?
That's such an important question. I think the biggest thing I can say is get involved right away. Don't wait for anybody else to tell you to do anything. Find something to do. First of all, find a friend who has Parkinson's. There are great resources online. And I know, like I said earlier, it's overwhelming for all the things, but start small. Everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, right? So find your person and start there. Find a local group that supports Parkinson's. Pretty much everywhere has one, and ask your doctor if you've got nowhere else to start. But Michael J. Fox Foundation, American Parkinson's Foundation, Davis Phinney, they all have great websites. And pretty much every state has their own local website that you can also find. Find a care partner support group too for your spouse or for your family because they're really going to need it right away or further down the line. Don't overlook that component. And of course, get moving. Don't think just because right now you're not showing significant decline that right now is not the time to work on it. Right now is the time to work on it. If you're doing great, keep doing great and keep working hard, because if you capitalize on the fact that you're doing great now, this is your time to shine and to keep maintaining. If you can kind of freeze time, this is the time to do it. We've heard a lot of people saying, well, I've not progressed far enough to get to that point. And that's absolutely not the mentality to have. So find a friend, get moving, and start. Just start.
Right. And I also think it's important to mention that get your doctor's approval before you start. Because I always like to bring that up just in case there's some underlying condition with that way they can make you as the instructor or the trainer aware of, hey, I've got this underlying issue. So I think it's important to mention that. Make sure that you run your exercise program and plan by your doctor to get their approval.
Absolutely.
To get their approval first.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is in terms of, I think back when I was newly diagnosed, there's a couple ways to think about it. You can really go into a dark place and go down the wrong road and just isolate yourself, drop out of all the activities, or you can say, I'm going to take charge of this. This is my life. Parkinson's is just along for the ride, and I'm going to get involved in. I think it's important, like you said, that get involved, find friends, and get involved in an exercise program, and it's going to go a long way in helping you. Because studies have shown that exercise is almost as important as medication. So if you can start exercising right off the bat after your diagnosis, it's going to go a long way in helping you, help to slow the progression of the disease. So
100%. Yeah.
And then finally, you're as a group fitness manager, are there group fitness classes that are an option for people with Parkinson's? I know a lot of times people think, I have Parkinson's, I can't do yoga, or Soul Fusion, which is a combination, I would say, of yoga, Pilates,
Strength
aerobics.
and cardio. Yeah. I always tell people that every group fitness class is for everybody. I have a very inclusive mentality for that. As instructors for group fitness, we are trained to find progressions and regressions for everybody. So that means basically you're finding modifications that makes everything work for everybody. So I always say, if you're in a wheelchair, you can do Zumba. There's a way to make everything work for everybody. So the biggest thing is to have a conversation with the instructor before class. Read the class description. There's always a description with every class. Usually you can find a video on YouTube or online of any class that's out there. But the biggest thing is either go watch that class ahead of time, take a peek at it, and then have a conversation. For the most part, with Parkinson's, again, it really depends on the person themselves. If you know what your biggest issue is it for you that you're wobbly? Is it the shuffling? Look at the class and then tell the instructor, hey, this is my issue. I'm having issues with standing on one foot. So with, for example, Soul Fusion, we have the option to have a chair in class. In most classes, if you ask, can I have a chair in class to hold on to, or a lot of studios will have rails around the side like ballet bars, position yourself where you can hold on to something. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, of course, you can have that. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable, you feel safe in class, that you feel welcome in class. There are a lot of different options to make class feel good for everybody. It's really just a matter of finding what works for you. There are a lot of different variations. So if you don't like getting on and off the floor right now, there's options where you don't have to do that. So in class, I teach the variations because I know there are some people in my class that don't like getting on the floor and they don't have Parkinson's. They just don't like getting on the floor, and that's totally fine. So I stand off and I show them, hey, if you don't want to get on the floor today, this is how you're going to make it work. And a lot of classes too, if you just don't like that move, you just, wait the 10 or 15 seconds until they've moved on from that move. Just kind of, shift side to side, march in place, hang out, and then just hop back into the movements the next time around. If you don't like to jump, I don't like to jump anymore. I've moved beyond that. Then do some squats. Again, march in place. There's a variation for everything. And if you're willing to try it and to look for it or to ask questions about it or to look up online, you're going to find it. Again, when we talked about attitude all the way. If you want to be there, you deserve to be there. If you want to be there and you want to find a way to be there, you're going to find it. And if you're going to ask the questions about it, the world's your oyster. Don't let anything stand in the way for you participating in anything. And again, find a friend and be there with a friend. And that goes for everybody in any class. Find your friend, find your group, and it makes it so much. That's the beauty of group fitness. Be there with the group.
Well, one of the things I'm impressed with is the people from Momentum that are taking group fitness classes.
Yes.
There's 4 or 5 people from the Momentum class that they were very apprehensive about taking a group fitness class. Mm-hmm. And now they come on a regular basis. They do several different classes. They do Soul Fusion, they do bar, they do yoga.
They're in water aerobics, cycling. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a group fitness classes are a great way to meet other people, but also feed off everybody else's energy and make new friends. I mean, and learn. So everybody's very encouraging. So I would highly recommend them as well.
It's a good cognitive challenge because in every class, you're going to challenge your brain, you're going to challenge your balance, you're going to challenge your flexibility in ways that you never know. It really, the more different things that you can try and do, the better your brain and body are going to benefit from that.
And then finally, if we've had the benefit of being in the Momentum class, well, there's going to be a lot of people out there that have Parkinson's that don't have that ability to go to a group like Momentum. How would you suggest they approach a trainer like yourself and say, can you help me design an exercise program? What are some things that they should look for?
That's a great question. So knowing especially what their challenges are, and that's where I think also journaling again, writing down what you found is maybe your struggle, taking that to the instructor and saying, hey, this is what I found is not working for me anymore. Or what are your goals? I know I need to get stronger. I know I'm having issues getting on and off the floor. I know my hips feel really tight. What are some good classes that you can recommend to help me with those things? Instructors or group fitness managers or trainers are really well versed in helping point you in the direction of a class or a series of classes, they're going to really work well with you. Another option is personal training. Not everybody's schedule can accommodate certain classes, or maybe you just don't want to wake up at 5:30 in the morning for a certain class, or maybe you just feel more comfortable working one-on-one with somebody, especially in the beginning, and that's totally normal. We see that a lot with people where you feel like just working with one instructor to start off with makes you feel more confident. That's a great way because then you can work specifically on everything that you need right now. So working with a personal trainer is a great option too. Starting there, and then also it's really nice. They might even have some options to do Zoom training. So finding people that specialize in Parkinson's movements or Parkinson's training. You can be also hooked up with a Parkinson's movement specialist, such as myself, anybody who's power trained, PWR. They have people online as well that can also help get you started.
Great. And there's probably other community groups out there that they could go and maybe take a Tai Chi class or a yoga class as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights, and it's been a great learning experience.
Thanks so much for having me.
So to close out, I want to thank Susannah for being here. And if possible, please visit liveparkinsons.com and sign up for the free monthly newsletter. There's a lot of great information in there that can help you in your daily life. And then if any of you are interested in finding out more about the 4 strategies that I've used to help live an exceptional life with Parkinson's, my book is on Amazon. It's called Spectacular Life, 4 Strategies for Living with Parkinson's Disease, My Journey to Happiness. And actually, Susannah wrote the foreword, and she was also an editor, and I put her on there as an author as well. So thank you for listening, and I hope you will listen into future podcasts. Thanks again, and have a great week.